3.1 is the mayor and council shall review items on the regular city council meeting agenda. Council, any questions at this time on the regular city council meeting agenda? Yes, Councilmember Chapados.
Mayor, I just wanted to point out that on consent agenda item 9.2, if you look at the supporting documentation, the shipping address is the old City Hall address. Just want to make sure we caught that, if that gets approved.
Okay. So the shipping address needs to be changed. All right. Anything else on on consent or the regular agenda items at this time? Okay, seeing no one, we'll go ahead and move on. That'll take us to item 3.2. City Council shall hear reports on meetings and/or conferences attended by the council. Council, time is yours. Vice Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, on May the 19th, had the pleasure of attending the 10th anniversary of the Muslim Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. This is an annual event where the Muslims in the Valley recognize different law enforcement officers and how they appreciate each other and how the cooperation that we have with the Muslim population. This year, our own Chief Stahl was recognized, which of course we always appreciate. It was a great meal. On the 20th, I attended the JMAC Sun Corridor meeting, where the planning council groups of the MAG, CAG, PAG, and the Sun Corridors met to discuss in detail the importance of transportation and especially trade, global trade, which is extremely important, will become more important as years go by. And of course, lastly, the 21st to the 23rd, I was pleasure of attending the International Council of Shopping Centers, along with the mayor and the economic development staff, where we met with the retail real estate brokers to pitch our city and do all we can to show them that what we have and why it's good to do business in Maricopa. Every year it gets better and better because more and more of these brokers and representatives are made aware and are aware of Maricopa. So it makes it much easier for us to communicate. That's what I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Appreciate it. Councilmember Chapados.
Thanks, Mayor. On Friday, May 26th, I was pleasure to attend the Water Safety Day presented by Maricopa Fire and Medical at Copper Sky. Our guys did a great job. There were CERT members there and firefighters there doing CPR training, talking about water safety. Police volunteers were there. Victim Advocate Services were there. It was a great turnout. I think they went through 400 hot dogs, Chief, and 700 bottles of water, something like that. So it was a great turnout. Thanks to Maricopa Fire and Medical for doing that. On Monday, May 29th, I was in attendance for the Memorial Day celebration at Copper Sky PD substation. Very nice event. Thanks Chief Stahl and PD for putting that on and for all the veterans that showed up. On Monday, the 5th, I attended the meeting for the presentation of the draft housing needs assessment plan, which we'll hear more about shortly. And then this morning, I was in attendance for the Maricopa Flood Control District Board meeting. Some good news there. They've approved their next year's budget. No increase in the tax levy. So this is the third year in a row that tax, secondary property tax for flood control will stay the same. So that's all I have, sir.
Thank you very much. Anyone else at this time wish to talk? Okay. We shall move on here.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to indicate that I had attended the Maricopa High School graduation and for 2017 graduates, and it was exciting event as usual, packed house, standing room only, and I'm really proud of our kids that made it through and on. And then again, also recognize the almost $7 million worth of scholarships and awards by this graduating class. So it was quite enjoyable. And I'd have to say as well that those young men and women who had opted to join the military got an outstanding probation. They did themselves. So all in all, it was a great event.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Appreciate it. Council, with your permission, I'm going to readjust the agenda a little bit. We're going to move the global water response letter to the last item on the agenda on the work session, and we're going to move 3.4 and 3.5 forward. Those are both Martin's things, and so we're going to go ahead and hear from Martin. So with your indulgence, we will move to item 3.4. The Mayor and City Council shall hear a presentation on the draft report for the Housing Needs Assessment Study from Mrs. Rebecca Rothenberg, consultant for the Housing Needs Assessment Study. So with that, Martin.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Good evening. As you remember, back in January, we did a contract with Atria Planning out of San Diego to do this housing needs assessment study for the city as sort of the first next step to the approval of the general plan, which happened late last year. And so we've kind of kept you in the loop, or tried to keep you in the loop on that. We had a short presentation about a month ago. What we've got before you tonight is the draft of the document, with our hope that in 2 weeks we'll be back before you, as long as we don't have anything major, that we'll be able to ask for acceptance of the document so that we can kind of move on with the next steps of that are even recommended by this document. You will find that hopefully when you sat down you had one of these at your seat. This is designed, so we have sort of three documents. We have the full document, we have an executive summary that's 8 or 9 pages, and then we have the shortened executive summary that is just designed to give you sort of a snapshot of the entire thing. This is something that we'd like to use as a tool later on as well, probably upload it to the website and so on and so forth. So that said, Rebecca Rothenberg is here, and she will go ahead and kind of give you the full lowdown on the results of the study. We're going to kind of move through this pretty quick because we know we do have a lot of stuff to get to tonight. If you have any questions, please feel free to stop her and we can kind of go from there. Otherwise, Rebecca?
Hello again. Thanks for having me. As Martin said, I know that we don't have a ton of time, so I will move quickly. Stop me if you need to, and I'm trying to make it so that we have enough time for Q&A at the end. Okay. So I think you've seen this slide before, but to give you an update, the final draft will have a model for supply and demand, and we'll talk about the current challenges and housing needs for the existing residents, and then also the types of housing that are in demand for the region, which will help to frame policy and implementation recommendations, and also to use as a potential marketing tool when we're discussing this with developers or state housing agencies. So as Martin said, we have a draft ready to go. The final document will be ready in a couple of weeks, and it'll be polished and not in a Word document. So it was a pretty robust community engagement process given the timeline for the study. So it was a 4 to 5 month time frame, and we did an online survey, focus group meetings, a one-day workshop. I was at the Salsa Festival, and I also had phone conversations with industry leaders, the state housing agency, apartment associations, home builders, and so forth. And all of that was incorporated into the final document. So here's a very high-level summary of the key findings. I don't think too much of it will be a surprise, but one of the big surprises early on in the study was that buying a home or owning a home is relatively affordable given regional prices, but renting is not. Rent prices are 30% higher than the region, and this is mostly due to the fact that there's only one housing type, which is the single-family home. So renting a single-family home is pretty affordable in Maricopa, but a lot of renters are not in the market for a single-family home. We can also say that Maricopa is somewhere in the middle in terms of income, education, home prices, but it isn't as well educated or as higher income as some of the other communities like Gilbert or Chandler, and we have some maps that will illustrate that. And then also what came out through a lot of the community engagement and survey responses is that The lack of amenities, particularly entertainment, dining, a town center, is a deterrent for some higher-end employers to come in and open up shop, and also for new residents. So it is a family-oriented community. You have more families with children. You have fewer young adults and fewer older adults, although the older population is increasing very quickly. It's also a moderate to middle income, and to reiterate, the education, most are moderate to middle educated. So here are some maps just to illustrate this. So the light green is average. So this is compared to regional averages broken out into quartiles. So you can see in the top right corner where Maricopa stands, and this is by block group, and then looking at it in the region. So the darker blue are the higher figures. So mostly average level of educational attainment if we're looking at college degrees. Here we see age distribution. If you look in the lower and the higher end, so the 20 to 29, it's less than the region. And then residents older than 55, it's less than the region. But as I mentioned, the older population is going up. It has doubled in the past 5 years. So we can expect that to be more of an issue going forward. And then here, per capita income, we see mostly average. So jumping to the economy, I went too far. That's okay, I'll skip up the last one. Oh, the red button. Thank you. So residents in Maricopa are workers. If you look at the bottom line, the number of working age population that's not in the labor force, it's significantly less than the region, state, or national average. And we did this mapping by different industry sectors. So you can see Maricopa has very few jobs. And the final report will have it by all the different industries if you want to check it out. So I also wanted to incorporate maps on service industry workers, because what we found later on is that workforce housing is a pretty big issue. And this is one example where we can track where workers live. And we located specifically the block where Harrah's is located, and see that there are a lot of Harrah's workers living in Maricopa, mostly, and also a little bit in Casa Grande. And then, if you flip it, where do the residents work? So, I think I stated it before, but it's certainly documented more in the report. Maricopa is a bedroom community. You have about 22,000 residents who are workers, but you only have 4,000 jobs. So residents have to leave town to access jobs. There are very few jobs, and you can see that illustrated here. So as a summary for housing, reiterating, homeownership is affordable, rental housing, not so much. Particularly at the $1,000 price point, I think it's 86% of all rental units are over $1,000. The average is $1,350. That's a lot higher than the region. You have a little bit of surplus for housing for sale, but it's not an issue for alarm, because other indicators like days on the market and the difference between asking and sales price are still within norm. So it's not like there's a ton of surplus, but there is a pretty severe shortage of rental housing. And that's in the data, and also from industry experts who work in the rental housing market. You also have limited housing diversity, as we already talked about, and very few housing opportunities for low and moderate income households. So that includes seniors with fixed incomes, persons living alone, folks in the service industry, and a lot of young professionals as well. So here you can see at the bottom 2 rows what the homeowner vacancy rate and rental vacancy rate is. And homeowner vacancy is higher than regional average, and rental vacancy rate is significantly lower. Now, this is a bit outdated from what I hear from industry experts. The rental vacancy rate is now less than 4%, which is a pretty severe shortage. You still need a little wiggle room for people to move around. Normally, it should be probably 7% is the ideal. So I think most people know that the foreclosure crisis hit Maricopa really hard. Values dropped 60%. They started recovering in 2012. Values are going up modestly. We're now at around the 2003 values. Zillow calls Maricopa a hot market, but I don't think that the values are going to spike like they were right before the recession. And then obviously you can see foreclosures are now steady. So going back to housing being very affordable to own, here's an image of the concentration of homes priced at above $300,000, and Maricopa, it's very low. Most homes are priced below $200,000. But when we look at asking rent, this is quite different from the home purchase market. The rental units above 1,000% are extremely high. So for the region, it's less than 50%, but for Maricopa, it's 86%. At the same time, you have a good number of renters. So the data shows 23% of all households are renters. The number is likely higher because there are a lot of renters renting in people's homes that they own, and those folks aren't getting tracked. So at a minimum, it's roughly a quarter of all households are renters. And then again, this is almost the exact same image as the rent. Most of the units are single-family homes, and that's why rents are high. So the opportunities and challenges is based on the surveys, the focus groups, and interviews with stakeholders, so mostly community feedback on the opportunities and challenges. And so I'll go through this quickly because I think most people know this, but you have a lot of land, you have a lot of large contiguous parcels that are ripe for a master plan development or a large-scale development. The city is also new, which attracts residents, and it also gives people an excitement about new planning, new development. You also have very low poverty rate and a high employment rate, which is attractive. And at the same time, you have affordable homes to buy. It's also, if we're talking about the identity right now, it is a family-oriented community with a lot of investment in recreation and public spaces. So that would be very attractive to new families and potential employers. And we're also seeing some new building activity, clear illustration of recovery from the recession. And just to show the expanse of land that's available for development. And I think most of these are city-owned properties or properties that are slated for some type of large-scale development. An image of recreation. So the challenges, nothing new here. There's no downtown, there's limited walkability. You don't have a lot of housing options, and this is a deterrent for a lot of different types of people. Single people, young adults, older adults, people who just don't want to buy a single-family home. And then there's also a little bit of separation with their neighborhood. So subdivisions can be defined as neighborhoods in Maricopa, and they're a bit walled off, so lacking connectivity. And then, of course, the traffic and lack of amenities. So now we get into some of the nitty-gritty of the study. And I will say that, I know I talked about it last time, but just to reiterate, the full study has a lot of information. Most of the information can be used for a housing needs assessment for a consolidated plan for federal grants through CDBG and home. So not all of it is focused on the general housing needs, but I tried to make it so that it's usable if that time comes where you are an eligible community. So housing for older adults, defined as 55 and plus. I focus here on 75 and over because that's the age that most experts find is where people need to change their housing habitat because of different needs. Physical and cognitive challenges may require additional accessibility or supportive services, or just having a smaller unit with less maintenance. So you don't have too many housing options for folks over 55. You have virtually no housing options for residents over 75. And that's going to be a pretty big issue over the next 10 years because there are 3,200 residents who are going to enter or who are going to hit 75 in the next 10 years. And it's a bit of a chicken or the egg, but when you look at the data again for age distribution, you have very few residents who are over 75, and that likely is that they have to leave because they don't have housing options in Maricopa. Housing for singles. Again, most single adults don't necessarily want to live in a large single-family home, but that's what's available. So we can see that most of the single folks, 3,500 households, which is a lot, live in a single-family home. And I tried to compare it with some neighboring communities, and you can see the discrepancy there. Workforce housing. So this is a broad range of people. So it goes from people working at Starbucks to your entry-level teachers, your firefighters, your police, and even entry-level high-tech professional jobs don't earn enough to live on their own in Maricopa. So if we're talking about existing residents, they're living with roommates, or they're renting a room, or they're actually just leaving the city. So they're coming into the city to work and then leaving the city to live on their own. In a broader sense, it also means that potential employers will look at what housing is available for their workers, and if they don't have enough diversity, they're going to look elsewhere. So having that option or the ranges for different types of jobs. And this is particularly true for young professionals who, for $700 or $800, can rent a nice apartment with a swimming pool and a clubhouse somewhere else, and they can't do that here. And apartments. So this, I'm specifically talking about smaller 1 or 2 bedroom units that are for rent, because a lot of young professionals are not in the market to buy right now. That's usually what happens when you get married and or have kids. And also after the recession, the millennials are more fearful of purchasing, so they want some kind of stability before they do so. And this is just a snapshot of what entry-level workers in the Phoenix MSA make compared to average rent. And this is conservative. Right in 2016, the average rent was actually $1,300. But just to give you an idea of what folks can afford. And I wanted to draw out also the computer programmers and web developers, because I know it, or I hear that that's one of the goals for economic development, to attract tech jobs. And this is where housing and economic development go together. So that's a high-level summary The next steps, my recommended next steps is to develop a housing plan, communicate with the state, communicate with developers, get some interest in developing housing in Maricopa, and potentially make some revisions to zoning and design standards, and think about having that town center and walkability to make it a more attractive place for people to come to. And that's it. I think that was pretty timely. So, questions?
Council, questions this time? Yes, Councilmember Chapados.
Rebecca, I just wanted to thank you once again. I also want to thank Martin and everybody in the planning department. I think this was very comprehensive. I loved a lot of the statistical information that you supplied, a lot of the charts and the maps and graphs and stuff. I think having the P&Z Commission there yesterday too for presentation of the preliminary draft was very, very helpful. I think my takeaway is that Maricopa has got a lot of possibilities and opportunities right now. But as we discussed yesterday, it's not just planning and land use in a vacuum. A lot of this ties into our transportation infrastructure. We've got the RTA coming up as a referendum issue in the fall. That's going to be very much associated with attracting workforce and employment opportunities and stuff here. You can have the best housing options, but if you can't move people around your city, you're back to square one. The other thing that I liked is that it gives us a lot of supporting documentation coupled with our 2040 vision plan, with our economic development strategic plan, with some of the other documents that we have in the city to use as recruitment for these developers. One of the things we talked about yesterday was more outreach. I know we've got people that are talking to us seriously about options, but a lot of it comes down to the numbers. If it doesn't pencil out and the return on their investment isn't going to pan out for them, we just need to look for the right opportunity and the right fit, and then see what we can make happen. I'm encouraged by the fact that workforce housing is a priority, housing for senior adults that don't want to live in a single-family home. I think we've got a lot of opportunities that we can offer development community here. So thank you again. Very nice job.
Thank you, Councilman Chapados.
Any other questions at this time? I didn't have any either. Very straightforward. We appreciate it. Made a lot of sense.
Okay, well, that was easy.
Thank you very much. We
Thank you,
appreciate all
Mayor
your work on
Price.
it.
Thank you, everyone.
That'll take us to item 3.5. The Mayor and City Council hear a presentation on the council-approved work plan 2016 to 17, implementation plan for the subdivision ordinance and zoning code updates. This is for discussion only. Rudy.
Mayor, council members, if I could get the presentation going. Sorry. Okay, if not, I'll just go through it. Oh,
Just ask Google.
yeah, I'll just go through it. Mayor, council members, just to give you a quick update, what we're doing is per the city's work plan for fiscal year 2016-2017, staff are proposing a major update to the city's subdivision ordinance, but in addition, also doing some minor tweaks to the current zoning code. The intent, I just want to give you some idea what the intent of our city subdivision ordinance is. We prescribed in there plating procedures when it comes to lot splits, plat amendments, subdivision plats, etc. We also have standards for planning developments and master plan developments, improvement plan procedures such as your pavement plans, your landscape plans, your street light plans. We have all set procedures set within those. Design standards for open space access, street location, street design, lot planning, easement planning, drainage, sewer. That's all embedded within that document itself. The history behind the subdivision code is that in '03 we adopted Pinell County's subdivision code. 3 years later, we went ahead and adopted the city subdivision code for the city of 2006. However, as I may have mentioned in previous meetings, from '06 to more recently, because of the downturn, that code wasn't really utilized as much. We recently learned that a lot of the codes in that '06 code really wasn't in liking the way we were doing things with development standards. So we did a minor text amendment in 2016 that, one, we incorporate our new roadway standards, and also, two, we modify a couple minor items in there that at least makes it a working document for us to continue. However, as of 2017, we'd like to initiate a major update for a couple reasons, and that is, apologize. One, it's an 11-year-old document. It's definitely outdated. The subject needs to complement with our new zoning code that we just adopted. Procedures and standards have definitely, in what's out there in the industry has definitely changed, and we notice a lot of stuff that we have currently doesn't meet current standards. There's a lot of innovative standards that we could work with out there with developers that makes our lives as planners and also engineering department a little bit easier to work with. And the second thing is it's not really user friendliness. If you look at that document, it's not very, we talked about this earlier, it's not a document it's a guiding tool. It's almost like a very, here's the book and go figure it out. We want to see if there's a document that can be more user friendly and be more of a guiding tool. If I do X, Y, and Z, if I do this plan, what do I got to do for such and such, and what's my outcome out of that? So we're looking for a document that gives more set guidance of what needs to be done for a specific case. So we started the RFP process for this, and one of the things that we've done with this RFP is we want three things to happen here. One is an assessment of the subdivision code, but also an assessment of the current zoning code as well, because we want to do some minor tweaks. We like what we did with the zoning code update in 2013, where our consultant kind of gave us an outline structure. Okay, this is a change that needs to be made, and these are the reasons why. So we're going to get an assessment of why specific code change needs to be made on that. Public outreach, public participation plan. A public participation plan is going to be derived by the consultant to make sure that whatever we do with this document, we are going to engage the public, stakeholders, and anyone that's interested in this code update. Stakeholder meetings, public forums, steering committees will definitely be utilized, and other innovative public engagement techniques that's out there that we could definitely utilize for this project. And lastly is the drafting and adoption of the text amendment. So where the consultant is going to go ahead and draft this document and then present to this body for review and approval. Currently in the process, we are, the RFP has been sent out for bid. We are currently reviewing proposals as we speak, and we do anticipate to recommend award of contract at your next city council meeting. With that, be happy to answer any questions, if any.
Council, questions on this? Yes, Councilmember Smith.
Thanks for the presentation. So I just wanted to make sure my understanding was correct regarding the subdivision ordinance. And what I mean by that is for years I've been hearing about the village concept, about streets that are lined with open space and fences similar to what we see in the Gilbert area, beautification so that it's welcoming. Is the subdivision ordinance where we make those desires more profound, and can we enhance that so that we start to see some of this? I know we haven't had any real new developments at this point, but I'm wondering, is this the right ordinance where we can put some meat in there to encourage that type of development, or is that a different ordinance?
Mayor, Councilmember Smith, that is correct. This is the right ordinance. We have design standards for street design, landscaping within the street design. We are looking at the concept of detached streets within our neighborhood streets, but that's something we need to work with our builders and developers to see how we can make it work for everyone. We have an idea of what those great communities look like. We just have to make sure we could fit it within at least educating how it can be done at a low impact cost. But yeah, this is the standard that we can incorporate it, and this is where we can engage the stakeholders and find hopefully a middle ground.
So would you say that those desires are already incorporated in the subdivision ordinance? It's just a matter of starting new developments and working with developers, or once we're finished with this, we'll see more enhancements that really point developers more toward that direction? Because it is really something that would beautify our city above and beyond our beautification already, but there's so many elements that are so exciting, and I would just like to get to that point where we're actually developing those types of developments.
Yeah. Mayor, Councilmember Smith, so it's not currently in the code.
Okay.
So, if any code, as it evolves over time, there's just little increments of where we could get a little closer to our vision. I think
Okay.
this is a next increment level of this code that we could start putting some pieces that gets closer to what we see our city streets to be what it should be.
Okay.
In our eyes, I think as planners, public streets are right-of-ways. They're not just streets, but they're also public spaces. So we have to start thinking of how we can create that as both as pedestrian, but also roadways.
Okay, perfect. I look forward to see what we can do to improve that. Thank you.
Councilmember Chapados.
Rudy, thanks for that presentation. I think one of the things that you've been involved in these conversations, and based on the housing needs assessment, typically in the past we've dealt with master plan communities, single-family residential units. I think this new code gives us an opportunity to examine alternatives and whatever incentives or enticements we can offer the development community to do something else, alternative housing, whether that's duplexes, apartments, condos, townhouses, container residential units, retail, shopping, whatever. The other thing I think I'd like to see, and it's something that you've heard me talk about with Chief Stahl, I think this is also a great opportunity for us to look at ways that we can incorporate, not necessarily codified, but suggestions and recommendations for SEPTED strategies in our communities and our developments, especially if we're going to get into diversified housing options. I think that's going to be key. We're seeing growth in retail and some other things like the Estrella Gin Business Park. We've got a lot of opportunities. I think that the 347 overpass is going to put a new facade on that area of the city, so there's some opportunities to look at doing some things there. So I'm encouraged by this. Thank you.
Mayor, Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Chapados, if I may, that's great. What's going to happen with this code, hopefully, is that we can harness all types of developments. One thing that we did lack in the subdivisions code is that we never expressed how do we deal with a condominium, a plat like the UTAS development over by the library, or how do we deal with apartments that has a condo. So we don't have standards for like that. I think this is going to give us those tools. In addition, I think one thing that came out good out of the zoning code is the built-in flexibility. To work with developers if there's a modification that needs to be made. There's a modification being made without going to a variance, but we get something out of that modification. So we're going to have that flexibility built in, similar to what we did in the zoning code. That way it's more easier to work with developers if there's some unique situation that we never could figure out during the process, but we have an option in the code to go and utilize that flexibility section. So, thank you.
Other questions at this time regarding this topic? Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmembers, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, yep.
All right, Rudy, thank you very much. I was just curious of proposals that we have received. Actually, I was curious about the number of proposals that we have received from the bidding process. How many of those that have submitted proposals are familiar with the Maricopa community and have done some work in the community previously?
Mayor, Councilmember Wade, we're still in process of getting those proposals, so I don't think if I could disclose that as we speak, because it's still in progress. If that helps.
Sure. Councilmember Wade?
That's fine. Okay, that's fine. I'll go ahead and wait until the process moves further. Because I anticipated making recommendations for the 21st, so I thought perhaps we might be able to answer that question. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. That concludes those. All right. We're going to go back to where we had moved the agenda around. We'll take us to item 3.3. The Mayor and City Council shall discuss the Global Water Response Letter. This is for discussion only. I want to go ahead and have Ron come on up.
Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Thank you, Ron.
Sorry about the schedule mishap there.
No, actually, it worked
Sign
out
of the
perfect.
times, probably a good sign. We're all very busy, a lot of good stuff going on. So appreciate the opportunity to be back here and present an update on our progress and efforts here in the community. As a reminder, this all started about, the recent events have started about 6 months ago when there was an unexpected and unfortunate public outcry related to a few water line failures that we had here in the city. And then ultimately that was followed up with an article that was written in January that expressed concerns about our metering and billing practices. That was ultimately followed up by you guys holding a special council session in early February where me and my team were here to listen to the concerns of the customers and yourselves related to those areas. So we still believe that the facts and circumstances demonstrate that Global has and continues to try to go beyond providing just efficient, reliable, and safe service, which is really our charge as a regulated utility, and that there's really no evidence of an overarching major failure as it comes to those areas of concern. However, as I've always said, we can certainly do better. So we listened to the feedback during those events, and since that time, and we've been working on, in many ways, to do better and continue to improve our service here in the community. Moving to the next. Oh, maybe I didn't get the clicker. Or is this the clicker? The green thing. Sorry, different clicker than I'm used to. All right, so it's a long slide, but I'll make it quick. So these are the actions we've taken to improve engagement and service here in the community. We did participate in 3 city council meetings. That's from a call to the public perspective and the special council session that was called. We did receive subsequent to that 26 written questions from city council members, and we responded to those questions in detail in writing. We provided back, I think on March 30th, over 20 pages of information to be responsive to those questions from City Council. In addition, we've responded to 63 customer complaints. That's year to date. Most of that came surrounding or subsequent to the special council session that was called. And we have provided all of those customer complaints, well, let me correct myself, since October of last year, up through us providing the 26 written responses to your questions. We provided all of those customer complaints. We can provide, and all the supporting documentation around how we responded to them and how we dealt with the Arizona Corporation Commission as related to those complaints. We can provide you all of them since that time and moving forward if you continue to desire to look at them. We are an open book. Of those 63 complaints, 3 of which were proven to be valid billing errors, and those were quickly rectified. We've held 2 customer forums. Our 3rd forum is scheduled for later this week, Thursday evening at our Global Water Center. I'll end on that point with an invitation to attend that. And based on the feedback we received throughout all of this time, we have begun to make some specific changes and process improvements whereby we think both the points being made were correct and the changes were manageable for us in the context of our regulations and other business requirements. And so some of those specific changes is we began waiving valid tariff charges as it relates to meter reread fees, and that's in specific circumstances. One of the main concerns we heard during the special council session was people getting somewhat unexpected and unexplainable spikes in their usage, thus higher bills, and being charged a fee associated with us coming out and trying to help them identify the source of that issue was a cause of concern for customers, and the council expressed that as well. We certainly understand that. So we have since waived those fees for instances where the bill is above $200 because that would be a unique or abnormal event. Ultimately, off of that, we also created a program whereby customers can request a free visit at any time if they just want to talk about our meters, talk about conservation programs, and or get assistance in leak detection activities at their residence. Another point of concern that we heard related to health situations where someone's health concern made it unable for them to pay their utility bill. We already had a policy in place for that. but certainly that kind of reinforced the fact that we needed to shore up that policy with our third-party vendor to make sure that situation never happened again. And that policy is, if in the event that situation ever occurs and we are notified that someone due to health effects cannot pay their utility bill timely, that should be pushed down to local utility staff here, and we will manage that on a case-by-case basis, which we've done for dozens of examples over the years. And then last, no new deposits for customers moving within the city and who currently have no deposits due to a good payment history. That's kind of more of a programming change, a simple policy change. Don't need to go into a lot of detail on that, but we have made that change based on the feedback we've received. In addition to those things, we've continued moving forward on the capital investments into the community here. We were reporting on $25 million in projects. That's now grown to $28 million. That's the nature of what we do. Costs change, scopes change a bit as we progress along. And that $28 million is to be invested over the course of a 2-year period, 2016 and 2017. What we have completed, fully complete at this point, happy to report, our meter replacement project is done. And that includes obviously the update and replacement of the fixed network meter reading system. In process is rolling out the new customer online portal that can benefit from the new meters and new technology and advanced tools that we will make available to our customers. That is also what I'm going to close on. Stepping down from there, we continue to move forward with a new well, a supply well, that will feed our Rancho Mirage Water Distribution Center, which is located in Rancho Mirage. Those facilities will benefit the overall system from a supply, pressure, and flow perspective. And ultimately, what it will do with one of the main sources of concern is when we had those line failures previously, it seemed to impact pressure throughout much of the city, even though they were isolated line failures. And so that redundant water distribution center and that additional supply and distribution capabilities will help keep the entire city in pressure, even in the event of major line failures, which unfortunately can and do occur. And finally, on the wastewater side.
So Ron, can I interrupt you there? So again, just for further clarification on that point, based on what you just explained, that was one of the questions that council had relayed regarding many of the I think Councilmember Wade had suggested this and asked this question, but just in general redundancy, right? I mean, system redundancy, because that was the feeling that one line goes down and half the city is without water. So what you're telling me there's that new well is going to help back up that redundancy and create pressure and flow. Granted, if a certain line breaks, it has a stem and goes out to a certain amount of ends. I get it, but is that what you're telling me there?
That is. I mean, redundancy and having a second source of supply, why those somewhat go hand in hand from a looping of the water distribution system perspective. You don't necessarily need that as long as you got enough pumping capacity that it can keep the rest of the system in water, depending upon the size of line failure that occurs. It just so happens they were major line failures, so the amount of water exiting the system took a fair amount of part of the water we were able to put into the system at the water distribution center. All of the systems looped for the right reasons. Looping major domestic systems is the correct way to construct and operate systems such as this. What I'm saying is putting a new distribution system or center on the opposite end of the distribution network will help make sure there's more water going in than coming out during the events of major line failures.
Perfect. Thank you.
So moving down from there, on the wastewater side, we are in the process of a major upgrade and expansion at our water reclamation facility, and including a new sanitary sewer lift station in the western part of the city of Maricopa. The last thing on this list, which might be the most pertinent to a lot of the concerns that we were hearing, was we negotiated and implement an improved service contract with our third-party vendor who provides customer service and billing services to our customers. So I got a couple quick slides on that. From a billing perspective, these numbers just demonstrate that through April of this year, having issued over 76,000 bills at that time, the accuracy rate was around, on average, the 99.9% range. So that still does mean there was 107 errors that were caught, and those bills needed to be rebilled. So that does occur, but it does put it into perspective on what scale those errors occur. if in the future you want to talk about what those errors are, we can do that. It is important to note under the key accomplishments table that's listed there, this was during a fairly major and typically complex meter replacement project. So to replace tens of thousands of meters and the meter reading system that sits on top of them, and have relatively nominal issues with customers, and to retain a billing accuracy rate at this level, I think goes to demonstrate the amount of focus that both Global Water and our third-party vendor Fathom put into the project and into this issue, which now based on the new systems being in place will only continue to improve. Call center. I think it's fair to say that many of the complaints were either sourced at the call center or made worse by the interactions that our customers had with the call center following their areas of concern. So we've put probably the most focus on this, as has our third-party vendor. So under the key accomplishments, I'll walk you through real quick. Under that new agreement we talked about, there's service levels that they need to hit. So they met those year to date, actually, which is what the table at the bottom of the slide is demonstrating. Walk through those real quick. They are obligated or required to answer 70% of the calls in under 120 seconds. That's been met in each of the last 6 months. The average speed of answer has been between 1 minute and 2 minutes. We do hear concerns and have in the past as people call in, and it could be 10, 20, even 30 minutes. Unfortunately, there's days of the years where the volume is just so abnormal, it's hard to deal with that. That's typically after holidays or on disconnect dates. But on average, the speed of answer is between 1 minute to 2 minutes. The abandonment rate is also something else we track. Ultimately, that's when people call in and they hang up before they get to a customer rep. There could be many reasons why they hang up, some not even maybe even our fault, but it's still a good metric to track just to make sure that's not growing and there's not maybe a source of some issue there. So they are obligated to keep the abandonment rate under 7%, with which they've met in all the last 6 months. And then we do track first call resolution, which is just that the customer had their what they were trying to either accomplish or their concern addressed in the one call, and it didn't require a follow-up from either the utility or the call center itself. Jumping back up to the key accomplishments table, off of that, there was a focus on retaining call center staff. Timing was very unfortunate. They did experience a large turnover in November of last year, which is also when we had the line breaks, and that was about the time that a lot of this blew up, so it was unfortunate events on both sides that led to that. But there's been a focus on retaining that staff and getting to a low turnover rate in that call center. More importantly is the next bullet, which we worked with them to select a dedicated group of call center staff dedicated to Global Water and the customers here in Maricopa. That's better for a lot of reasons. I think it's pretty logical why that's better from a training, retention, and redundancy perspective. And so we're glad they made that change. It's something we fought and negotiated on. And so you won't have call center reps that are also answering calls for a myriad of other providers and municipalities. That team has been out here. Oh, sorry, Councilwoman Chapados.
Yeah, Ron, what's your typical call volume for a day, on a normal day, not a disconnect day or seasonal?
1 second. For each month, we're averaging about 5,000, so it's fairly high. Okay. We've had that dedicated team out here to Maricopa working with, I was just speaking to John, our general manager, you guys know, working with himself and his team to learn the field operations of a utility. That the benefits of that are quite obvious, and we'll continue to do that type of training. And then they went beyond this. I mean, they're not just doing this in response to Global Water and the issues that's occurred here in the city of Maricopa. This vendor, as we've mentioned before, provides these services to over 400,000 connections throughout the U.S. They are continuously improving as well. So they actually hired an outside consultant who is focused on quality assurance and empathy training. Empathy was something we heard a lot about, and that's important in a call center environment. We want them to listen to the customers and not go immediately or too quickly to scripts. We all understand that it's not just water-based, any business-based, you call a call center, they're scripts. They can't all be experts on everything. And so, but to not go to the scripts too quick and bring up issues like leaks and neighbors stealing water, we really educated them on the proper process to get through that and to really try to listen to the customer and solve their issue. And then if it gets too complex, push it to the utility. Certainly as a vendor, they try not to do that, but we wanted to make it very clear to them, that's what we're here for, these are our customers, and if any issue gets out of the normal type of question and answer back and forth, direct them to us, and we will reach out to that customer. Okay, and finally, they did add additional call center leadership, so more oversight for all of these things. Call center customer satisfaction is the last thing I will hit on that's on this slide. At the end of every one of those calls, the customers have the option to take a simple one-question survey. How would you rate your satisfaction based on that call on a scale of 1 to 10? And so you'd be surprised, but historically over 30% of all customers take that survey, so it's a very good sampling based on the volume of calls we just talked about. And historically, at least as you can see here for the last 6 months, that rating has routinely been between the 9 and 10 range. So certainly there was enough evidence to suggest there were issues with the call center that could be improved. We're trying to demonstrate we've addressed those issues and continue to work on them. But overall, the overwhelming majority of customers do have a positive interaction with that call center based on those metrics. Two slides left. So moving forward, I think we often talked about and we're focused on just the pure utility operations aspect, safe, efficient, reliable, and the water conservation element. But we were overlooking some key pieces. So we've definitely learned from this whole experience, and moving forward, we will remain focused on customer engagement through ongoing forums, newsletters, and articles. We will remain focused on customer service through continuous improvements, both with internal staff and our third-party vendor. We were really focused on maximizing the benefits of all these advanced technology systems that we put in place, including the new system that we'll be rolling out here in a few weeks, which have a lot of customer benefits and tools for them to utilize. And then we're focused on completing these capital projects, which obviously will benefit this overall system operations, but really go to allowing Maricopa to grow unimpeded for years and years to come in a very sustainable way, which as your utility partner is one of our primary charges. We're trying to make sure we can all see that growth rate that we expect. So in closing, we also do remain focused on the larger water resource issue, which sometimes gets covered up with all of the day-to-day ongoings of a utility. I'm not going to walk through this slide. This is just some graphics from a presentation that I gave at one of the customer forums. Unfortunately, that customer forum was not well attended, and that happens, and that's okay. But I do think it's such a fundamental piece of the overall discussion on what we are doing here in our utilities in Maricopa and elsewhere, that at the end of the day, Global Water was founded to focus on one fact, and that fact is there is shrinking water supply and increasing demand. And so everything that we do, from our purple pipe recycled water network to our rate structure, which has 7 tiers and a rebate, to these technology platforms where we're trying to put conservation tools in the hands of our customers, has all been built on that fundamental issue that is our responsibility to address as the water purveyor. But even though we've taken on that burden, this is obviously such an important topic for each of you and our customers. We're going to continue to try to get this information out and into your hands. So I will give this presentation at any time, anywhere, to anybody, including yourselves. And I believe the council has been even invited to the next META meeting where I've been scheduled to give this presentation. So if you're there, look forward to doing that. And finally, invite you to our customer forum on Thursday evening. This is the invite that went out to all of the customers. Again, that agenda is focused on the completion of the metering project, reviewing the type of meters we selected, what they do, and how we're integrating that AMI or automated meter reading data that comes from the system into advanced tools for our customers. And really, customers can save time, save money, and save water all at the same time by signing up for these electronic systems and taking advantage of those tools. And we're going to make a big push to get as many as we can. So anybody here and yourselves, we invite you to attend Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. So a couple of questions. I know that council members probably have some questions. I was just curious. So where are we at in that process? I mean, I know that you're going to probably discuss that further at this forum, but where are we at the process in these meters being done? And clearly in your previous slide, it said that it was in process. But I've signed up online and have that ready, but at the time that I last looked at it, it was, that information not available yet because it'll be coming in the next month or two, maybe 3. But again, it was just at the beginning of replacing all the water meters. So where are we at there?
So we're actually very close to turning it on, and the way that'll work is what we want to impress upon our customers and everybody is you can go ahead and sign up today because the existing platform already has a lot of the typical online benefits. Functions. What will improve once we release the new version is your ability to look at your daily and hourly and historical usage and analyze that and set up the alerts we've been talking about. Right. So we're very close to releasing that new version. I mean, I hate to put a date out there, but I think we're within 3 to 4 weeks of putting that out there. It's probably actually going to be sooner. Sure. And we've already got the one-page customer notice drafted that gives the directions on how to sign up and how to use these tools written and teed up and ready to go. Perfect. As soon as we finish our testing of the new system in the test environment, which is what's happening right now, and we feel confident with it all, we will release the new version, send out that notice, and advertise it here locally to make sure people know that that's available.
Perfect. Council, questions at this time? Other questions?
Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Wade.
Yes, sir. Ron, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I would imagine that the low turnout from the customer forums is probably a double-edged sword, indicating that perhaps people are being serviced and taken care of, and they don't feel that they need to come to a public forum in order to get their needs taken care of. So I look at that from that perspective, if you will. So I'm kind of happy to hear that, and I'm also happy that you're still continuing that. But I wanted to convey a personal story. I got a call from your center indicating that my water was higher at the time that I got the call than it was the previous month or 4 months of water usage during that period of time, so that I could go out and unstill the leak. And was able to get that taken care of. So I'm sure you have the city council some kind of special program when you call us first to tell us that. So thank you very much for having done that. But in all kidding aside, I just wanted to convey that because I thought that was great, and I appreciate that taking place. Thank you.
Mayor, Councilmember Wade, yeah, thank you for the feedback. I personally watch your guys' accounts to make sure you get those calls. No. Actually, that's a program that has been in place for years and years, and that is actually identified through bill exception reporting, it's called. It just means we do analysis on the bills when we actually run the bills, and if it's an abnormal bill, we do reach out. And we actually, last year, called 5,000 customers notifying them of an abnormal bill. It's difficult to go hold the customers and ultimately get the chance to walk through a situation like that with them, but it does occur. The online tools are meant to make that faster and simpler, whereby you, if you sign up, will get a text or email immediately after that event occurs versus waiting for the bill to run. And I will express that there is no other water utility in the state of Arizona, and only a few across the country, that provide that tool to their customers, and we're weeks away from that.
That's great.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Ron, thank you for the presentation. I have just a few questions. The over 200 new policy, I'm curious how it's working because I get notified from Facebook posts. Quite often someone links me to them. Hey Nancy, here's another one, over 200. And I basically state, contact Global Water, they have a new policy. If it's over 200, they'll come out and help. If you have a problem, contact me back. I have not been contacted back by any of those. And so my impression is that it's working. I wanted to hear what your impression was.
My impression is that it's working as well. I mean, ultimately, it is difficult to prove to a customer that they had a leak, and sometimes you can't, and sometimes maybe the concern is still there to a bit, that they're not sure what happened that caused that higher bill, but we can walk them through how meters work. We can walk them through the fact that leaks can and do occur. And then by waiving the fee, which is the new policy, it seems to, in their mind and ours, pacify the situation. And we certainly have not experienced issues anywhere the volume or level that we were hearing on that topic recently. So I think the changes are working.
I definitely appreciate that change. Have you noticed an increase in home visits because of that, or has it stayed as stable as it was prior?
I don't know if we've increased the home visits because of that. The same time that we've been offering this new service, putting in the new meters, putting in the AMI system, putting in some of these other process improvements, we've probably driven down home visits due to other causes.
Okay.
And so it's kind of stayed the same, but these are better home visits than were occurring in the past.
Thank you. My next question is on question 15, and you don't have to look, I'll just give you a brief synopsis. But basically, there were significant concerns coming my way regarding the due date and the changing due date of bills. And I read through actually all of your approximately 40 pages of questions and answers. You were very in-depth in your answers, but I still didn't walk away satisfied with that question on billing dates, because people are in sync with their due dates. And if their due dates are constantly changing, even if it's 1 day here, 2 days there, back to 1 day, back to 0, it's very confusing, especially for the folks who are living on a day-to-day, month-to-month paycheck, and they're right at the limit all the time. And so I would like to encourage Global Water to go back and look at what can be done, because I read through the answer, I get your perspective, but it left me thinking there's still something that can be done to solidify a date for your, 5 cycles, 8 cycles? I couldn't remember.
There's 4 cycles in
4
the city here,
cycles,
yes.
okay. I feel like there's still something that can make the customers dealing with paying that bill simpler, so they're not dealing with an ever-changing date.
Sure, Mayor, Councilwoman Smith. So for the people who haven't had the benefit of reading that, it is a little bit complicated and long. So to summarize it, because we have 4 cycles, which the intent of splitting it between 4 cycles is to spread the work evenly between the billing remittance process, so you can manage it with less people. The other reason we shift days slightly is because every day of the month, or as you go between months, the same day isn't on the same day of the week. And so because of our billing due date and then disconnection sequence, what we try to do is line up the bill date and then the due date and then ultimately the disconnection date early in the week and not on weeks that have holidays, so that if somebody is disconnected, they're not disconnected right before a holiday, a short week, or a weekend. So the reason we actually make those small changes, we believe, is our effort to minimize that customer issue on their behalf. We don't have to do that. So the question will be, and we'll take the point and we'll go back and think it through once again. It's a balance between maybe what's a little bit more important to have that consistency, or doing disconnects on a Thursday before a holiday. I think there's probably a balance, and we'll continue to work on that.
Okay, I would appreciate that, thank you. So just a little story of my own. I've become the personal pest to Ron and John because I moved homes. And so I had a whole new experience of connecting with Global Water. And I feel as though the process went very smoothly, I should say, in terms of connection. But I feel as though there were some lessons learned that I wanted to share with you regarding additional ease of customer interface. And one of them is better IDing of charges on a statement. I think I contacted you twice, like, what is this with this charge? What is this with this charge? And one of them had to deal with connection fees that weren't really well spelled out, and one of them had to do with the fact that you had transferred the end of my bill from my previous home to my new home, And I didn't give permission for that to happen, nor did I give permission for you to stop automatic withdrawals. And so it confused me as the customer and made one bill ginormous when I wasn't expecting it to be. And so, you know, it is what it is and we've dealt with it. But I feel like there's a lesson there learned too in terms of identification of what are those charges, because it wasn't clear what those charges were. And then why, you know, possibly not taking away someone's automatic pay when they're counting on that to happen and not finding out, whoops, I'm late on this bill because it was transferred over to another account. Anyway, those were my lessons learned.
Sure, and Councilwoman Smith, so there are technical reasons why when someone calls in to disconnect service on their existing property that we stop auto pay. It is policy, maybe it didn't happen in your situation, it is policy that the customer is notified that their auto pay will stop when they move out of the property. And since the auto pay has stopped, and because you've opened an account at a new address, we typically have transferred the account balance to that new account, so there's one bill instead of two. I can appreciate the point that the descriptions weren't clear enough for you to be able to track that and understand it without reaching out to us, so we will look into that.
I appreciate that.
No problem.
I'm just looking for ways to make things easier for your customers so they're not so frustrated.
I can tell, I will keep, I've said it before and I'll say it again, I am actually happy this all happened because this is progress, which is what needs to happen.
Mayor, may I keep going? I have a couple more. One of the hardest things to talk about is a reasonable rate of return. So on question 19, the question was asked, at what point will infrastructure be paid off and will our rates go down because you're no longer having to cover the cost? I know my husband started a business several years ago and he had to invest in some, let's just call it infrastructure. And obviously he was making less money because he was having to pay for that infrastructure. But then once that was paid off, his profits went up, and if he had customers, he could make the choice to lower the rates for those customers because of the fact that he no longer had that fee. So the question was asked, and it never really got to the bottom line in regards to when will that happen for Maricopa residents? Because at some point, you're not bearing the cost of all that infrastructure, and I know it might be too soon at this point, but there will come a day. And does your business plan show us when that will be and when rates could be lowered for residents here in Maricopa?
Yeah, so, I mean, ultimately, there's a lot to that question.
Yes.
Here's where I think it will start, which is water and wastewater utility assets are the most expensive form of utility assets out of any industry. We're 4 times more expensive than power, 7 times more expensive than gas and cable. And that's really effective our infrastructure being bigger and deeper, and then the complexities with meeting the Safe Drinking Water Act, and on the wastewater side, those regulatory things. So these are long-lived, long-depreciated assets. The loans we take out from a capital perspective that finance this infrastructure are 30-year loans. And then ultimately from an equity side, there's a cost to that equity as well. So ultimately the equation is, what is your rate of return on your invested capital, and also a one-for-one recovery of your operating expenses. So in the 13 years that Global Water has been here, since acquiring the 2 disparate developer utilities and investing the couple $100 million we've invested here, we, on that rate of return calculation, have not earned anywhere near our authorized rate of return that is approved by the Corporation Commission, and that is a 7.5% rate of return for the pleasure of what we do here from a utility perspective. And the reason that is multiple things, and these things don't change. Ultimately, it's my job and those responsible in my business to ultimately get that rate of return closer to what's authorized. But you have to continue to invest in these utilities. As we just talked about, we're spending $28 million in the combination of last year and this year, which far exceeds the return on these utilities the way they exist today. In addition, expenses grow. Now, we all understand typical inflation, but the other things that drive expense growth in our industry are increasing regulations from an environmental perspective, but also from an economic perspective. And then the main cost drivers in your business, which is labor, consumables, power, things like that. So ultimately, almost every Class A professional utility, not just in Arizona, but in the country, is in for a rate case every 3 to 5 years because they're chasing that authorized rate of return. They're always behind it because they're always having to continue to invest, which is very expensive, and because expenses continue to grow. And so your return is in between what you're earning today and that authorized, and it kind of bounces around there. It is our stated goal, which I can't promise because at the end of the day, it's I have responsibilities as a business owner, to attempt to manage those drivers that need to invest in increasing expenses in parallel with the growth that this community is seeing, which is certainly a positive, so that we can stay in a tight enough range of that authorized rate of return that we're earning enough for our shareholders to continue to invest, which is what you do want to continue to grow this community, and not have to go back in for a rate case, which is unpleasant for us, you, and the customers. And so that's what we're attempting to do. The issue is not will rates ever go down. I'm not aware of that occurring in our industry almost ever anywhere. Water is rates in general, and this is municipal as well. Just look at all municipalities in the valley or elsewhere. Water rates will continue to go up due to those drivers I talked about. But our goal is to manage it within the confines of growth and the agreed upon rate phase-in that we already have approved by our Corporation Commission, so that we don't have to go back in through a rate case and increase rates again. So do we have a model that can accurately predict every one of those variables? No, but as we move through the dynamic world we're in, we're trying to manage all of those variables in a way that keeps us from having to go back in for another rate case anytime soon.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you're trying to manage so that you don't have to go in for another rate increase case. I think one of the hardest things for the people of Maricopa to understand, and I even am very, very challenged grasping it, is, and you and I have spoken personally, why does a for-profit water utility get a ACC decision that you're allowed to make, and I think you said up to 7.5% rate of return? The hardest thing is knowing that during the hard times, you're still striving for that 7.5 when all the rest of us are seeing our retirement accounts go down and all the rest of us are seeing our investments go down. I think that's one of the hardest things, and you don't have to address that at this point, but it just leaves a taste in your mouth that we're all suffering, but our water prices have the opportunity of going up so that you can maintain a reasonable rate of return when we're not getting a reasonable rate of return. So I think that's one of the hardest things that you have to fight. And I don't even know what I would suggest for you in terms of fighting that, because it's just an uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this isn't the appropriate venue, and
Right.
I know we've been trying to find time to sit down together and have that conversation as with everybody I'm willing to.
Right.
I think ultimately, as in other industries, water is an interesting animal because it falls from the sky and is under the ground and runs down rivers and is essential to human life, that people view it differently. 100%. That's why it's all I've done in my professional career and all I've ever done. It's an important thing. But just like in other industry, there are benefits to public-private partnerships. And I've heard this council and this mayor and city staff talk about looking to maximize private-public partnerships where it makes the most sense to the benefit of the citizens and the community. Well, why a public-private partnership on water is viewed so differently is a complicated discussion. I think given the opportunity, as previous councils definitely agreed with and we signed MOUs with and signed revised MOUs with, there's merits to that public-private partnership, and it'd be my intent to get this council to at least recognize that as well. And and build upon that for a better partnership. Rate of return is a discussion on a piece of it, but having two viable partners working together for everybody's benefit, I think can overcome that concern.
Well, I
in
do
my view.
appreciate your efforts to maintain costs such that you don't have to go in for a rate increase. I appreciate that. Hope that it continues for years to come.
Thank
I
you.
think that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Manfredi.
Just wanted to thank you guys for coming out today. It's great to hear that we've actually been successful, I believe, in quelling the outpouring of complaints, I guess you would call them. The fact that Global Water outnumbers residents in the audience today is an amazing thing, because last time you guys were here, this place was full. We had to put chairs over there where you guys were sitting, and people were voicing their concerns. And today, their concerns have been answered. People are, it seems to be, happy with the answers. And, you know, I hope if they have any questions, they show up at this June 8th meeting and ask them. Because I think, where was it? It was in Elements when I went over, and you had it set up with stations. It was great. And I was standing outside and listening to people and talking to them, and they said, you know, their answers are, they're getting the answers they need. So thank you so much for stepping up.
Thank you.
Other questions this time? Ron,
Mr. Mayor?
oh, yep, go ahead.
Just the previous discussion kind of got to me a little bit in terms of what we're asking of our partner in terms of providing the service that they provide. And of course, they're not in the business as a nonprofit, therefore profit entity, as Tribe, as is Culver's, as is many of the other folks that are out there in private businesses. And so I just wanted to express my concern about that. I think that because it is a utility and because we have the expectation that it's going to be there for us, regardless of what the fees might be or what the what the fees might be, it should not necessarily take away from them being allowed to be good corporate citizens to themselves and profits. And so I just wanted to address that. I'm not suggesting that that's what you're saying here, Councilmember Smith, but it just kind of struck me a little bit as I was able to listen here and not be in the room, just listen to that conversation. And I just wanted to express my concerns about that. And I think that just as I said, they're taking the steps that are necessary in order to provide the service, to be good partners with the city and with the community itself. And I certainly want to recognize that again, to make that special. And if you don't mind, if you do have a offline conversation, I would certainly like to participate in some of that discussion as well, moving forward.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate it. Ron, I have a couple of questions. You know, one of the things that I think Councilmember Smith was alluding to, and certainly everybody comes in and starts on a basis, right? Everyone's got to start somewhere. And the floor here is, why do we pay so much versus everybody else who pays so little? And I guess my question to you is kind of an on-the-record sort of statement. What is your 30-second elevator speech that you tell somebody when they come to you with that question? And I know it's a loaded question because just like Councilmember Smith, there's a lot to it. But the fact of the matter is we still have to be able to answer it. You have to be able to answer it. Why, when I moved to Maricopa, is the water so much better, or is the system so much better, or what is it that makes my water more expensive than Chandler's water? And going back to Councilmember Smith's question, about the fact that that's what people are doing. People are comparing, and right or wrong, I mean, we get hit with it all the time as a city. Well, where I came from back in North Carolina, this is what we did. Well, you got different state laws, different budgets, different tax structures, different, implementations of things, and so things are different, and those little variances can make huge impacts, just like a ripple pebble, and you throw, that pebble in the water, as I think your first slide showed. And so I guess at the end of the day, I would turn it back to you. How do you answer those questions?
Yeah, Mayor, happy to do that. I think, with all due respect, my 30-second elevator speech is similar to yours when it comes to taxes and in the county as well. And I've heard you give it, which is the city was 5,000 people in 2003. It went to 40,000 people in 5 years. The investment required to stay out in front of that unprecedented population growth was significant. There was demands upon the utility, as there was on the city, to make the city a great place for economic development, and so we all invested in ourselves, as you did, with beautiful parks and buildings and streets, and we did the same. And I know ultimately the voters voted for a lot of that, and that is the difference, and that is a difference. At the end of the day, we're a private regulated provider, so that is a difference, but we ultimately had to use our professional judgment and working with our partners, understanding what the city wanted as well as the developers, and ultimately to what that means to the customers, to make those professional decisions. And we did what we thought was necessary and best to allow this city to flourish. And so that's a long answer for that piece of it, but a piece of it is the investment required up front to allow this city to be what it is today. Second, we had a major recession that occurred. Just to remind everybody, we bought these utilities in 2003, or the first one. We bought the troubled one that was under a state of emergency when we bought them in 2005, I believe. We didn't go in for a rate case in 2010, yet we invested over $200 million. We were focused on those things, not rate cases at the time. But when the recession hit, we had to go back in for a rate case, and it goes to the mathematical equation that we walked through a little bit with Councilwoman Smith. Our investment, a proper return on that investment, plus just a recovery of our operating expenses, produces the revenue requirement on the utility. And I will say, and that's I'm not giving you a 30-second because I really want to address the issue. We can go back and boil this down to the highlights that are 30 seconds. But I will say that's also an improper comparison. In full stop end, and here's why. Utilities are never apples to apples. It doesn't matter if you go down the street to Casa Grande. It doesn't matter if you go across the country to the Midwest. Utility rates are a function of only a few things. When the infrastructure was built, how much of it was built, how it was financed, and the cost to operate that infrastructure, which is an effect of water quality, where do you get your water from, et cetera. You can have utilities across the street where all of those variables are different, thus they have different rates. So here, the more appropriate, even though there's not apples to apples comparisons, the best comparison you can get is to communities that went through a similar situation as we did here. Go look at Verado and their rates. Go look at Anthem and their rates. Go look at Buckeye and their rates. Go look at Santan Valley and their rates. And we've got the data, we'll send it to you. It was a slide we had at a customer forum. In that comparison, which is communities that grew up from nothing into major suburbs and or municipalities in a matter of a few years, we are actually right in the middle, if not lower than several of them. So I understand the frustration of getting that question asked to you all the time. And I certainly understand that that is a complicated discussion to have, certainly if you don't do it all day, every day like we do. The highlights I ask that you be willing to listen to and then convey to our customers if you so wish, otherwise give them my email address, is the utility invested significantly in the years that it mattered. And ultimately, the rates are set by a third-party economic regulator who controls what those rates are based off those inputs, what they invested, what it takes to run the utilities. That's it. We're not asking for more. And if you compare that appropriately to other cities or suburbs similar characteristics, the rates are not high.
Thank you. A couple other questions. One of the other questions I had is so I think the city itself has gone through some of the challenges that our customers have gone through in comparing some of our past 6 months worth of bills where you see spikes and fluctuations. So I guess my question would be is can and do we get to participate as a city, as a corporate meter, so to speak, in the same type of, did you go through and replace those corporate meters just like you did in the home meters? And if so, can we participate in the same sort of variances where, we have a person on staff that can receive those text messages or emails, or it comes to a person here so that we can investigate ourselves, is City Hall, is Copper Sky, is Pecana Park going through these types of things? Because ultimately that's costing the taxpayers money.
Yeah, there's no doubt. The new type of meters, the meter technology and AMI system that sits on top of them is the same. It's a little bit more complicated on high diameter, high volume uses to get used to their usage patterns, because commercial facilities, especially certainly ones that are tied to large irrigation use, are very variable. So it does make it hard to program in things we as the utility should be looking for. But you, as the end user that understands those usage characteristics better than we would, can certainly use the data that's going to be made available to you and the alerts that you can still set on those meters to achieve the same thing as a residential customer. And we'd be open to working with you on that. In fact, we even went a little bit beyond that because high volume, high usage customers, their total demand matters more to them and ultimately to us, the utility. We even put on a little bit more sophisticated metering technology than the residential meters that's available at that site. So we actually have a lot of data coming off those meters.
And I think that would be great. I mean, from the standpoint of, you talked about economic development earlier in your presentation. I mean, one of the things that we as a city are always trying to discuss, and there's every time or any person that shows up anywhere is always going to have pros and cons, right? There's always good things on the resume and not so great things on the resume. And so, when we try and sell ourselves, that's one of those things that we look through as we talk about trying to attract companies and corporations here that may or may not be high water users, especially in fabrication. Those are one of the things that I think that we want to be able to express and utilize, is that we have that ability, i.e. you guys have that ability, that it can be watched and tracked and traced in a way and perhaps that Intel doesn't do, so to speak, right? And so those are some things that I think that are good. I have to say that I am encouraged in a variety of ways. I'm very encouraged on the customer service side. Honestly, that's something that I think is really good. Please keep that up. As you have broken out this section for customers to call and deal with the Maricopa components, the field training, those types of things, I think that's important and pertinent, because I think you hit the nail on the head with empathy, and that might sound somewhat... I'm probably not going to come up with the right words, so I won't attempt it. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think showing empathy to the person that's calling is crucially and vitally important. And like you said, not so quick to go to the speeches or the scripts, but continue to please focus on that customer service point, because that is the impression that people leave with. End all be all, that's what they leave with. Whether they're new, they're passing through, they're just trying out Maricopa, whatever the case might be. The other side of it is the social media interface, and while we've talked somewhat extensively on this, I do much like Councilmember Smith does. When I get to this point of I'll do my best to answer things, but when it comes down to a detailed question, I'll refer you or I'll refer somebody else to deal with that. And while I understand Global's not looking for a heavy social media presence, I do know and I do understand and that those areas, those sites are tracked and watched, and I think that's important, because I think as a council, as we do our best to learn about the pulse of the society and what people want, and while we live here and we work here and we see people in the grocery store, the fact of the matter is there's a heavy social media presence. And so I think keeping an eye on those things helps us be proactive rather than just reactive, especially in your case. And I think the last thing that I would say as well is that, something else that we've talked about is, I think that something that is not done sufficiently, and while I know you talked about it earlier, this is something you focused on prior to the customer service side, but I think as you align the customer service side of things, you need to go back and really target those millennials and those young families that are here. And while indeed there is a cost that is higher based on the newness of infrastructure, I think we really have to focus on the green aspect that we're trying to provide. Because at the end of the day, this is about dealing with the water tables, the water management associations that really are how do my kids have a home here and still have the ability to turn on the water faucet and water comes out, because that's what people expect, right? And so I know that's something that you guys grapple with and deal with every day as far as recharging the water table, taking the in versus the out, showing those 100-year terms. But I think that's something that we need to keep going on and talking about. That is something that I use on a regular basis to talk about it with people, is that, yeah, you're going to pay a little different price here than you would in Chandler, but every home has a purple pipe to it. Every business has a purple pipe to it. And what does that mean for you? What does it mean for your kids, for your posterity, et cetera? So, any comments or concerns or thoughts you have on that, on those comments? But I think that those are areas that I've seen that have been greatly improved.
Yes, Mayor. So, point noted on all the prior ones. I agree with you somewhat. We've had a discussion on social media, and maybe that's just a pet peeve of mine, but that is the new reality. To finish, maybe I think it's appropriate on the last point. Does this thing go back as well? There we go. So I didn't spend a lot of time on these graphics, but it's exactly what you were talking about. I mean, this is the reality. And like it or not, Pinal County is going to be ground zero for this reality. And we have and continue to our best to manage this reality for not just City of Maricopa, but really for Pinal County and the state of Arizona in general. The graphic in the center, which if we can get beyond these other things, and we're always going to be receptive to your feedback and our customers' feedback, but that is a highlight for this community that maybe it sounds like you're using in some of your conversations, but otherwise maybe is forgotten. That green bar is the water usage per customer for Santa Cruz Water Company. As you'll note, it's the lowest on the graph compared to all the other private water providers. It's because we can have access to their data because of the reporting that they make to the ACC. I'm sure we can figure that out on the municipal side as well, but we're quite a bit lower on a per home consumption than our competitors and than the industry average. And that's not a mistake. Like, that's not by accident. That is by intentional design. The installation of purple pipe, which does also go to why the wastewater flat fee is high. And so I can understand as a piece of my elevator talk, but maybe I skipped. You can't go back. So putting in a second set of pipes in all the streets to use recycled water for all outdoor irrigation, which has a 35% impact on the amount of groundwater you otherwise would need. Putting in the rate structure, which is a double-edged sword, and customers don't like it because it's complicated and the highest tier is so high. When they have a leak, it's really noticeable because it runs the cost up real quick. Well, a 6-tier rate design with a rebate threshold and a rebate for those that conserve and use less than the community average is the most innovative rate design in the country for a water utility. We've written books on it. The reason that exists is so that customers, you get a double-edged sword. You can take it as a negative. You're penalizing the customers. Well, it's to us, and we're not perfect. Everything could be tweaked over time. It was the start of the right amount of carrot and stick for when you're dealing with water, which is a resource, scarce resource. You use too much, you pay a lot more. You use less though, you assist us in conservation, we're going to give you a rebate. We're not sure, power companies do it. We're not sure of any other water utility that provides a rebate to their customers. We do that here. We've rebated over $3 million to customers since we put the program in place in 2010. And I'm not saying all this to pat ourselves on the back. I'm saying that's a piece of the conversation that has been lost. Like, it is by intentional design. It is by the way we work with developers and the city as our partners over the last 15 years that put all these things in place that this community uses less groundwater and or surface water, it doesn't matter where your source is, per home than any other similar utility in communities such as this. Now, the other double-edged sword on that is people say, well, then why do I pay more? I'm using less. It's a harsh reality, but that's the reality. It costs more to get to that because you have to have a longer-term view. We have to stretch the local available resources in this city, this county, in this state, in the Southwest, in different parts of the world to the furthest extent possible. I mean, you can always go get there's two buckets, right? You can conserve what you got or you can go get more. If we have to go, which is already being talked about at the state level, to Baja and build a desal plant and an international partnership with Mexico and pump desalinated ocean water to Arizona, you will not like those costs, I assure you. If we do an exchange like that with the state of California, and we take more off the Colorado River, and we as a state build them a desalination plant, or several of them off their major cities and swap them water, you're not going to like the cost of water. So in a longer term view, while it may cost a bit more today to otherwise shield yourself from the long-term real implications of where water cost is going, is how we've constructed this utility. And I think that is important.
Perfect. That answers my questions. Anyone else? Councilmember Smith?
Ron, since your company's done the work and you have the data, would you mind forwarding the data on utility rates for water for cities that have started from the ground up, as you indicated?
You'll have it tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions at this time? Thank you very much. We appreciate
All
it.
right, thanks,
Appreciate you
everyone.
guys coming.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
With that, council, we need to have an E-session item certainly before we move to the regular session. So can I have a motion to move to
So
E-session,
moved.
please? Have a motion. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Aye. Thanks, Henry. We'll call you in a second.